people don't want to face fundraising climate change, but you have to, okay? So you are the brave souls. Usually our webinars get anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 people attending, which is great. This one always gets a little less. I think we got 500 or 600, which is fine. It's because this topic is a little more disconcerting. So you are the brave ones who are ready to face this. And I'm Greg Warner, by the way. I'm the CEO and founder of MarketSmart. I also invented a couple of applications that I ended up, instead of selling them, I gave them away to the sector. One's called the Fundraising Report Card, which is a BI tool, which is like an analytics, and it's kind of like Tableau light, and it's completely free. So it gives you all the metrics that you need at no cost. And that's available at fundraisingreportcard.com. The links will be at the end. There's also the DAF widget I invented, which is an app that helps you get a ton more donor advised fund gifts from people who have already put money in their DAFs. So that's at dafwidget.com. So I'm kind of an inventor is really what I am. And for those of you who don't know me, I wrote the book, Engagement Fundraising. We'll talk a little bit about that. And of course, my company is called MarketSmart. We won't talk that much about that. Maybe a little bit. All right, so we're gonna go through a ton of data today. That's probably a little more than half of the presentation, is to just kind of prove to you the science behind fundraising climate change and why I believe it exists and why you should be concerned about it. And then, and that's kind of like the dark side, that's the stormy weather, that's the frightening part. But then I'm gonna go over 3 solid strategies in detail about how you can deal with fundraising climate change. There may be a hint of the fact that you could use MarketSmart to combat this. But really, you'll see in the presentation, I'm going to be giving you free ideas so that you could do all this on your own. You don't have to hire us for this. All right, so just to start off, I want to do a quick poll, and I'm going to launch it. It's what I want to find out is compared with not 5. There's a typo in this. It says compared with 5 weeks ago. I meant 5 years ago. Compared to 5 years ago, do you feel that fewer people overall are donating nowadays, or are more people donating nowadays? This is just want to see what you think. And this is, again, 5 years ago. Compared with 5 years ago, are more people donating? All right, so I'm going to give you about 8 more seconds. So go ahead and click, click, click. Get them in there. Then I'll show you the real data. All right, this is interesting. Very interesting. All right, I'm going to end the poll, and then I'm going to share the results. So you should be able to see now. Most people, only 40%, said definitely not. Absolutely. That is what I am seeing or feeling is 32%. Compared with 5 years ago, feel that fewer people are donating. Okay, interesting. So let's go get to the data. Click that off. All right, so most organizations overall, and we're seeing this from the data in our fundraising report card as well, but according to Target Analytics, going up to 2015, which is the data that I could find for them, we're finding that fewer people are giving. Fewer people, the mass quantity of people giving to charity is on the decline over the past, well, it's now 15 years. But this chart only shows 10 years of that. And it's been an average of about 2.8% of people dropping out of giving. Okay. Now, more recent data from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, part of AFP, has shown that from 2017 to 2018, 4.5% of there was a drop of 4.5% out of giving altogether. And in the first quarter of this year, I'd have to go check to see if they have the second quarter out. We're now in the fourth quarter, of course, but there was a drop of 5.3%. And this is before COVID actually got underway. So it's going to be an interesting year because some are telling me that actually more people are donating now as a result of COVID than ever. And we were worried about that, but we'll have to see. Nonetheless, overall, all the signs in the data are showing that fewer people are donating in general. Now, this is interesting because the population, especially in the US, has been growing at anywhere from 0.6% to 1% every year. So if the population is growing, but a bigger percent of people are dropping out of giving, that's kind of a problem. Now, some would say that this is because the older folks who are the primary donors are dropping out or passing away from the they're no longer in the cohort, you know. But that the data doesn't show that, and in fact, more people are moving into the plus 65 category at a quicker rate. And you can see how that's going to turn out. More people are going to be moving into that by 2030, 2040, 2050. We're going to have a large number of people that are going to be older. So I'm not sure that's the answer. Also, people have been dropping out even while the economy was on track. You know, we had historically low unemployment. It's still, honestly, it's pretty good. I think it's under 7% now. So having low unemployment, of course, before the COVID pandemic, people were dropping out, but people were employed, right? Yet at the same time that people were dropping out of giving, more people were buying coffee from Starbucks. I mean, I'm kind of convoluting this, but I'm showing you the stock price, or I'm sorry, the total revenue of Starbucks. So people are spending money on coffee, like they'll give up $5 for a cup of Joe, but they won't spend the money on giving to charity. It's a little disconcerting. We have to think about that. Why is that? And I will give you some answers. So the first of the answers of why this is happening is because people are becoming less religious. And the number of people who state that they have no religion has been increasing steadily for a number of years. According to this study from Jumpstart Labs, the importance of religion and the connection of religion making people more likely to give had been quite prominent. And it's the fact that people are stating that they have no religion may be playing a part in why they're becoming less philanthropic. Now, this is kind of a sketchy chart. It was taken out of, I think it was the Chronicle of Philanthropy. So giving, this is a more of a gross or a mass number. Giving to religion as a share of total giving has been on the decline. It was 25, well, what is that, 30 something years ago. It was over 50%, and now it's more like 30%, and it may even be going down from there. In addition to that, there has been this growth in acceptance of a more socialist, and like I just said before everybody got on, those who heard, I'm an independent, so I'm not going to take sides here. I'm just looking at the data, and people, there's sort of a more of an acceptance of socialism. This study right before, during the caucuses, found that 56% of likely Democratic caucus goers would be satisfied with a nominee who thinks that the US should be more socialist. Now, from my understanding, socialist countries tend to have a little higher, well, maybe even a lot higher taxes. And people kind of feel like, well, the philanthropy is kind of built into the taxes. So perhaps, and I'm no economist or politician, but perhaps there's a belief as people become more accepting of socialism that philanthropy is not as necessary and that they'd rather that the government take care of these things. So on the other side of the coin is then the favorability, if you will, of capitalism, which has been declining, and especially among the younger cohorts. The younger someone is, the less favorable capitalism is to them. And these are your future donors, of course. So this is of concern for me in someone who cares about the philanthropic sector. Now, bigger than that, bigger than those two things is really the issue of trust, okay? So any exchange of money really requires trust. If you don't trust an organization, a person, an institution, it's going to really throw up a tremendous barrier to the transaction. It's just human nature that we don't exchange money with people we don't trust. So there's a couple ways we can look at this. Give.org is one of the ones that measures whether or not people trust charities more or less or the same than they did 5 years ago. And what they found is that only 10% of the people they studied said that they trust charities more now than they did 5 years ago. 32%, that's a third, said they trust charities less. And the other 50%, 58 said the same, which is nice. But in addition to all this, they also asked about what percent are optimistic in their trust improving of charities over time, and only 10% said that they are optimistic about that. It's not a good sign. This is why we have a storm cloud here in this visual with the lightning bolt, Another one, if that one wasn't good enough for you, the Edelman Trust Barometer. This is actually a bigger study and it's worldwide and it's amazing. I put all the links to everything in the slides, which you'll get probably on Monday. I think we'll send it out. The Edelman Trust Barometer is much more robust study. And they found in 2018, there was a big drop, 9% drop in trust of non-government organizations, NGOs, in the US. Now, what's worse or more disconcerting is that they found an 18% drop in trust among the informed public. So this is the educated, highly educated people, usually probably more wealthy people. We're seeing a bigger drop in trust. In fact, over the past 3 years, something really sad and miraculous in a way happened is that people said that they trust businesses more than they trust NGOs. So you can see where it sort of traded off here in 2018, and now it's even starting to grow in its separation. I mean, this is not good. Distrust is a bad thing. All the while, competition for the donor dollar keeps increasing. I mean, the number of nonprofits that are popping up, and people can almost create them on their kitchen table with the computer and software is increasing. I mean, you have more competition than ever. So this is, of course, this is the data I could find was the trend. I don't know if this has been increasing, but I bet it has been. I mean, doubling in 15 years, that's quite a lot of competition for you. Yet, even with all that's going on, even with people dropping out of giving altogether, as I expressed, the amount of money given to charity in total still keeps increasing kind of matching pretty much the growth of the GDP is pretty much what it does on average. It's about 2% a year. So this is all the while when people are dropping out of giving, right? So it's fascinating. Oh, and the most recent figures for giving are now at 400, almost 450 billion. This comes from the Giving USA report that comes out once a year. So that's interesting. People are dropping out of giving, but more revenue is going into the charitable sector. Fascinating, right? So now if you are a user of our fundraising report card, again, that's like Tableau, or that's, a visualizer of data. It's totally free, and we only need 3 data points, all anonymous data points that you drag and drop, and you'll get tons of reports, a lot more than I'm going to show you. But if you do that and look at your own data, there's also at the very top, there's a benchmarks page where you can see how everybody's doing, and even see it by your sector if you're a hospital, for instance, or a college. Anyway, what we're seeing here is that the average donation amount has been increasing. It declined in 2019 just a little bit, but so that's part of the picture of why the why more money is going into the philanthropic sector, is because people are giving larger amounts, at least on average. Now we'll get to this in a little bit, but this is weighted because there are more unbelievably major donors that are giving. We'll get to that in a second. What's disconcerting is that there's been a drop in retention rates, right? So for all the events or the emails and the direct mail, the telemarketing, the retention rates of donors, number of donors retained, has been in general on the decline, okay? Now, what's worse is that the revenue retention, not the number of donors, but the amount of revenue that gets retained from the same donors year to year, has been declining. That's a real big problem. Retention is key. Lifetime value is key. If you can't retain people, it's too expensive to acquire them. That's a big problem. So let's look at this from a couple of different subsets. Like first-time donor retention is generally on the downturn. Generally on the downturn. Not that much though. It went from 23 to 29 to 19 to 20. So that's not that indicative. But the reactivated donors, that's definitely on the decline. The ones that you reactivate, they lapse and then you reactivate them, which costs a lot of money, but they're not retaining it the way that they used to. And then talking about repeat donors, these are not the ones that lapse, but these are just the ones that after their second give, then they give again and again and again. They had been declining. Now it started to creep back up. We'll have to see what it looks like at the end of 2020. But in general, the numbers don't exactly look stellar. Now, let's break this down again. And these benchmarks, again, are on the fundraisingreportcard.com's benchmarks page. Let's look at the low dollar donors first compared to other larger donors, okay? The average donation amount among those who give under $100 is only $25, okay? And they retain at only 23%. That's less than 1 in 4 of these new donors are gonna give again. And the lifetime value of those new donors is only $44. Now, I didn't include the cost of acquiring them, but you might want to consider what is your cost to acquire a low dollar donor, because the lifetime value, at least on average here, is only $44. So if it costs you $45 to acquire a low dollar donor, and the average lifetime value is $44.59, that's not good. All right, now let's go to the other side of the spectrum, and we're looking at $5,000 and up donors. These are the major donors in general. Their average donation amount is $30,000. their donation rate, well, here, the donor retention rate is much higher than that of the low dollar donors. It's almost 38%, and their lifetime value is $75,000. So you have to consider, what does it cost to acquire a major donor and end up with that lifetime value? This doesn't get into bequests or anything like that. We're just talking about lifetime donation revenue. So now we can compare these two side by side, and it really gets kind of a little bit interesting or frightening, whichever way you want to look at it. You know, the difference of the average donation amount, the donor retention is drastically different, and look at the lifetime value. I mean, it's just exponential, right? So what we found from 8,500 organizations that have put their data into this free tool is that what we used to say was the 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle, is now a 69.62 rule. In other words, the donors giving over $5,000 are about a little more than half of 1% of your donor base, and they're making up about 69% of your donation revenue. While the donors giving under $100 are making up 80% of all your donors, but they only make up about almost 7.5% of your donation revenue, right? So leads, I've been in board meetings and marketing meetings and such where they're like, well, if we could just get everybody to give $50, right? But you kind of can't. It's expensive to do that. And that's what I call populist fundraising. I mean, that works actually in populism or politics, like, because essentially if you get everybody to give $1, then you're sort of gaining their vote, you know, and you're gaining that kind of commitment. So populist fundraising works in politics, but it doesn't work in charitable giving. Charitable giving requires an 80-20 rule, a Pareto principle, which is now 69.62. Now, this also applies, interestingly, because anybody can make a legacy gift, and some would say, well, then we should approach everybody about legacy giving. And you could kind of do that, but 82%, this is from the Lilly School at Indiana, 82% of the dollars from legacy gifts come from just 20% of the donors. Okay, now, and these are legacy donors, I mean, and Dr. Russell James' most recent research proved and found that it's about 50% of the promised legacy gifts never come true, never come true. So this is interesting because I believe, and I don't have the data on this, but my gut and my data tells me that the people who are wealthier, who make more plans that are harder to change, are less likely to change their gifts or make promises that don't happen. So this further points to, you know, who's got the money and where is the money coming from, really? Who should we be focusing on, right? Now, I'm going to keep pummeling at this because this is challenging for you all, because the number of channels that we use to communicate with our supporters is growing. It used to be, when I was a kid, we had a TV, we had 11 channels, and like 3 of them were fuzzy, you know, and then you got radio and newspapers, magazines, mail, and telephone. But now you've got like so many channels. You got texting, email, this, that, the other thing. And each donor might have their different ways that they want to be communicated with, or they might want to engage with you and your organization completely on their own through just navigating online or clicking on emails, watching videos, things like that. So this makes your job very challenging, especially if you're trying to get a hold of people. You know, they're just not answering the phone or responding to email anymore. So what's happening here is that over the decades, and because of technology and increased channels and distrust, people are developing a tremendous amount of donor self-sufficiency, right? They want to do it on their own. This is my belief, but it's also agreed upon by the author of Donor-Centered Fundraising. Many of you may have heard of Penelope Burke, right? And she wrote in Advancing Philanthropy, she surveyed 3,000 bequest donors asking, do you have a planned gift officer? And only 18% said yes. And the majority of those said things like, they give me everything I need, but I really don't need much from them, which is painful, because you all have so much to offer, you know, and you can help them. But people are feeling like they want to be more self-sufficient. It's another challenge. Now, the wealthiest among them may need your help more than others, but then there's also many of them may not want to share their personal finances with a person that they don't yet trust. What I wrote about in my book with regard to this is that people really have what I call four selves, or that's what they desire, is four selves. That means they want to self-qualify, meaning they want to be allowed to opt in for your communications. They want you to ask them for permission to communicate with them. They want to then be able to self-educate so that they can navigate the decision-making process on their own. They want to be to self-involve. They want to immerse themselves. They want to see videos or hear stories from you, but a lot on their own time, you know? And they want to even self-solicit. Self-solicitation is actually an interesting key. It was written about in a book called Spin Selling, after a researcher studied 35,000 sales visits back in 1984, I think it was. It's one of my favorite books on selling, is that self-solicitation is actually the key to sales and the key to fundraising. It's when that donor says, you know, what can I do? You know, they recognize the problem and then they self-solicit and they look at you and they say, what is it? What can I do to help? Tell me, I'll do it. That's self-solicitation. And that's what people actually want. Your job is to help them self-solicit just as much as it is, if not more, than it is to solicit them. Hope that makes sense. All right. What people don't want and what builds distrust is more junk mail, more telemarketing, and more spam. Or I should just say, people don't like to be interrupted. They don't like impersonal, irrelevant, transactional types of messages and interruptions. Now, this is taking it to the extreme, is that in Great Britain, some of you may have heard 5-7 years ago, this nice old lady, Olive Cook, she actually was reported, there was a news story on her because she would give to so many organizations. They sent her mail, she'd give to them. Now, I have to tell you, she ended up with a pile. I mean, every day, every week, everybody sold her name to other charities and this and that. Everybody was soliciting her. Now, sadly, she ended up committing suicide. I told you it was an extreme. Now, her family will even say, and it told folks, look, it wasn't only because of all this. It wasn't because she wanted to get, she was distressed in her older years and such. However, nonetheless, the media went to town with it. And this was the instigator to the GDPR protection regulations that all of us deal with today, and that's coming over, it's PIPEDA and such in Canada and now moving into the US and other countries. So basically it's an opt-in permit. The government is deciding for us that we need to help with protecting donors' information and allowing them an easy way to opt in and opt out. All right. So, all right, this is all the bad news pretty much, is all this stuff is happening that I just described. And we're basically in this state where the giving is increasing because we've got these larger gifts coming in, as I showed you earlier. But the smaller and mid-level donors are disappearing from most organizations. So I challenge you to either look at your own database and deal with your own staff, or you can drag and drop it into the fundraising report card and see how you're doing. Hopefully you're bucking the trend, but most organizations just aren't. Additionally, Brian at Network for Good wrote that nonprofits are being challenged by all of these factors that I described. And unfortunately, most organizations are finding what he calls, they're finding themselves flat-footed and unable to pivot and understand what to do. Now, most of this has to do with a transactional mindset for solicitation, which is mostly direct mail, email, and maybe even events and telemarketing, which kind of spurs impulse-oriented, low-dollar gifts. And that transactional mindset where you can sign a purchase order and just send stuff out is very easy for nonprofits, but it's not helping the situation. And what works better is a relational type of marketing and fundraising, which is not impulse oriented or transactional. It takes a lot more time to help major donors give more by helping them go through the consideration process. And according to a benchmark study my company funded last year, I think it ends up taking about over 2 years to close a major gift on average. That's a long time, and leadership and board members are not usually willing to wait. So they keep going back to the transactional, which only causes more problems and more distrust. All right. Whew. I hope you're all still there. Because now I'm going to talk about what should we do about this, right? And the answer is not to do more of the transactional low dollar impulse oriented marketing. Remember the donors are kind of fed up with this stuff, and they're showing it with their feet and their wallets. What people want is fairness and respect and control. They want to opt in. They want to be able to self-navigate the decision-making process, and they want things to be convenient, even for major giving. They want it to be convenient. So all this combines, and this is what I call when you're in a product, and I'm a marketing guy, so I think about products. If you're trying to sell a product or service, it's all about how much value do you provide, because the more value you provide, and convenience is value, respect is value, all this is value. The more value you provide, the more likely it is that you're going to gain money. All right. So especially when I say providing value, you want to give people an off-ramp, give them a frictionless way to say, and especially philanthropists and wealthier people, to say, I'm ready to talk to you now about giving a major gift. Okay? Hounding the donors for attention, beating them with a hammer over the head before they're ready will annoy them. And it's going to burn your bridges, right? So I was talking to someone earlier today, and I said, so think about this. You make a new friend in the neighborhood. She comes over. First thing she does is she says, can you loan me $5? You're kind of like, okay, I'll give you $5, right? And then she goes away. She comes back maybe a week later, knocks on the door, and she says, that was great. Thank you. Thank you. Can you give me 20? And you're like, all right, get out of here, right? It's not fun. It's not fun. You're thinking, well, what did I get? Now, think about this. If after you gave her the $5, what if she came back and said, all right, that is wonderful. I want to find out everything I can about you, because I want to help you find meaning in your life. I will do whatever it takes to make you happy. Thank you so much. Let's work on your life being better together. I'm going to do that for you in exchange. Thank you. That person you'll probably end up being friends with for a long time. And when she comes and asks for $20, you probably give it to her if she really delivered on that promise. Okay. So in this state of fundraising climate change, as I call it, the moniker I made up for all this, is that there's going to be winners and losers, and technology is the key. You look at the encyclopedias I had as a kid, and now you have it all online. technology. You look at cabs, and then you go to Uber. You look at Blockbuster. I mean, there's one Blockbuster left. I think there were tens of thousands of them at one time. And now you have, this and now Disney and such. So the key to the winners these days is always technology. And in fact, this is a little sad coming from Moody's about colleges. One of 5 small private colleges are in fundamental stress, they say, and a quarter are in the red. These people need to change. People need to leverage technology. It's got to happen. I don't see any other way. It's a little self-serving for me to say it because, of course, I run a technology company that helps with this, but you don't have to use my technology. No matter what you do, technology cuts costs if you use it right, and it helps you sort of surf past the clouds of fundraising climate change. Right? It makes technology can make the board and the leadership happy. It should make fundraisers happy, and certainly should make your donors happy too. All right. So let's finally get into what you can do about it. But I do have another poll, a quick poll here. If people have not thrown up because of everything that I just told you. And I'm going to go back to the polls. Hang on just a second. If I do this right. Oops, did I share results? I may not have. Oops. All right, actually, I don't have the other poll. So never mind, we'll skip the poll. I was just gonna ask you all if you believed me and believed in fundraising climate change, but that's okay. No poll, we skipped the poll. Let's talk about how we do it. You want a quick fix? There's no quick fix, all right? This traditional, interruptive, transactional, arm's length approach for small donations, to get them to make these impulsive but small gifts, it's just not gonna take you, it's not gonna get you where you need to be if you want to fund an endowment, if you want to have longevity. But the strategies for success, which I'll give you in just a second, involve a more contemporary, it's a more technology-enabled, a compassionate, donor-centric approach that helps supporters self-navigate their own decision-making process in the way that's necessary for what I call a highly considered decision, right? So the bigger the amount of money someone is thinking about transferring, the more highly considered that decision is, and the more value they expect from you in order to go ahead and make that decision and make that transaction. So the first thing that you need to do is you really need to focus on the 80-20 or the 69.62. So if you are a believer in populism for philanthropy, and you don't believe in me, when I say it's only for politics or politicians, I have to tell you that I disagree. I think that you've got to get really good at giving your first-class passengers first-class experiences. I know that leaves out some, and we want to democratize philanthropy. I get that. But for the sake of your own individual organization, I believe it's very important that you focus on the 80-20. Worry about the democratization of philanthropy maybe second. Now, sadly, most budgets are not set up like this. In other words, the percentage, if most of your revenue is coming from at least 80%, or I should say, if 80% of your revenue, or in this case, 69%, is coming from your top donors, then why isn't 80% of your fundraising investment focused on those amazing people, whereby rather it's usually that the majority of your fundraising expenses and budgets are focused on acquisition and lower dollar donors, okay, which churn and have very low lifetime value. So this is kind of what I'm trying to say is you've really got to shore up your base. Focus on your base of the wealthiest people first. Consider your budget is what I'm saying. And you can, for probably the first thing you're thinking is, well, but then how do we get new donors? And I say, well, if you're readjusting your budget, then you are focusing your budget on not only major donors in your wheelhouse already, but you're finding new ways to bring in major donors. This donor pyramid concept doesn't really exist these days as much anymore. You can find new major donors, and they honestly, we see the data every day. They don't start with $50. They start with $5,000. You're seeing them in your data when in their credit card, they'll put $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 on a credit card online. But the best way to find new major donors is through referrals, and that starts with your board members. But you can also do that online with digital technology. I mean, after people engage with you or sign up for a newsletter or attend an event or something, is like find out if they have friends or colleagues, especially among your major donors, find out if they have people that they would like to introduce you to. Referrals, very important. Also, in your next board meeting in your packet, why not just ask your board members if they have friends, put 5 lines under there and, their name, their email, would they be willing to introduce you? Maybe they want to talk to them on their own first. Do they want any information to pass on and such? Focus on referrals. Just one referral from one major donor can be really, really life-changing for a mission. All right, number 2 is to focus on volunteers. They're kind of like these diamonds in the rough. They're amazing people. They're giving their most valuable asset, which is their time. And they're right there in your midst. They're volunteering, and 49% of them are high net worth individuals, according to the US Trust study on high net worth philanthropy. So the interesting thing about this that you may or may not know is they're actually testing you. 55.9% volunteer at several organizations. So they're testing you out. And if they stop volunteering, that might mean that they didn't find value in what you're doing, and they're going to double down or triple down on the other charity that they've been working for. The other thing is that they want to give. They actually want to give. Most of them do give, the vast majority. So they're high net worth, they're testing you, and they want to give. Big place to find new money, even if they've never donated before. Another one is through social media. Now, I'll highlight BWF, big consulting firm. Of course, you could, MarketSmart can help you with this too, but for the sake of sort of being fair, they found that they could generate 43 new major gift prospects from a $900 investment by promoting a certain type of newsletter on Facebook and getting people to subscribe. I mean, that's low cost, and the returns are exponential. So I encourage you to find new major donors and invest in that. All right. Number 2 is support your supporters. This can be across the board. Of course, it's easier to support fewer supporters in their decision-making process. If you support them, they will support your organization. So this means you've got to listen to them. Like the person I was telling you that comes by and asks for $5, and then they ask you, what can I do for you? How can I help you? You need to ask people about them. Don't continue asking them for money. Ask them for advice. Ask them for their opinion. Ask them how they want to find meaning in their lives. Because if you can get them to tell you about them, who they are and why they care and such, and especially where they are in the consideration process for certain types of gifts, that'll make them feel good, and it'll support their consideration process. Okay, so it's about focusing on them and their needs, and a little less on your process. Nonprofits are really famous for thinking about charts like these that I found on the internet. And I get it. We have to have a process for doing our good work, but your donors don't care that much about your process, and what they care about very much is their stage of the consideration deliberation, right? So you need to focus a little less on your process and a little more on where each donor resides in the consideration continuum before you start sending them messages. Because a message for an action-oriented person is very much different than a person who's in stewardship and is considering whether they're happy or sad about giving you money, or a person who's at the very beginning of the process for consideration. Okay, so recognize that a low dollar impulse oriented decision from cash or check, credit card, is usually going to move someone through this consideration continuum, sometimes in a matter of minutes. But the high dollar, highly considered decision is going to take up to 2 years. And leadership, board members have got to understand that this process exists. And if they really want to raise massive amounts of money and stop creating distrust, they have to take a more deliberate, considerate type of cadence in how they approach people and support the people in the way they make their decisions. Recognize that most people are spending most of the time in the why part of the consideration process. In other words, they're thinking about their alma mater. They're thinking about the fact that they met their husband there. They're thinking about the fact that they're meeting up old friends. They're thinking, these are all the reasons why they care about your institution. And then for a small period, they get into the house stage where they want to take action and actually give. And that's when a facilitator comes in, also known as a fundraiser. But then as soon as they're done with the transaction, then they go into the why stage, which is very long and lengthy yet again until the next time that they go back around and into the why stage on the other side, where they reconsider whether or not to make another major gift. So unfortunately, most fundraising marketing focuses on solicitation and the how, like make it now, do it this way, do it that way, double, triple match, all that kind of stuff. But most people are spending most of their time in the why stages, and your marketing actually has to accommodate that until you can find when you have to track when people are in the how stage, and then you accommodate them by sending people who are in that stage messages that are then appropriate for that stage. God, I hope all this makes sense. You'll tell me in the reviews afterwards. So if you do this though, and you help build trust, help them think about their lives and think about how they can be a hero in their own life story, then they will grow. They will grow to move themselves into a self-solicitation arena. Okay, it's all about learning about them. Now, I will say that this is also a little self-serving because I pioneered the development of this technology for donor surveys. Other people have now used it, sadly, or copied it. Sadly, they use it to sort of collect data, not to cultivate relationships. So donor surveys are really technology-enabled donor discovery for the purpose of qualifying and prioritizing, so that then you can deal properly with the why stages. In other words, if you use a survey, you have to use the data to cultivate the relationship properly. If you don't, and you just collect the data, you leave the donors quite upset that you collected information from them. In other words, you took from them, or you wasted their time without proving that you listened and did anything valuable for them with that data. So I'm happy that people are using more surveys nowadays, but I'm also sad that the idea has been warped and used to collect data and become very self-serving for nonprofits, while ignoring what the purpose of a donor survey really is. It's really to collect information so then you can show them that you know them and that you care about them and where they are in the process, and support them in their decision-making process. Now, you don't have to buy our system. You can just go online and get the guide I wrote for conducting donor surveys. I give it all to you. Just please, 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 if you do this, use the data to cultivate relationships. If you do it and you don't cultivate relationships, you will further diminish the trust that we're hoping to build. So don't do that wrong. The other part is that you should use VIP microsites so that the donors, you support their self-involvement with your mission. And what that means is, and here's one of our customers, we don't handle their whole website. This is all for admissions and such, and maybe, aid, grants, same with this page, right? But what we do is we help and we recommend that you create a VIP microsite that is designed, and the words, the pictures, everything is different. It's not about admissions. It's not about aid. It's all about helping philanthropic, older, well-meaning people find meaning in their lives through giving major gifts. So you got to be really careful about how you make a VIP microsite. Got to use certain words, certain designs, make the font bigger, and especially you need things like, and this is where I mentioned earlier, the DAF widget that I created. Give it away for free. You can download it today at dafwidget.com. You don't have to buy anything from us, but you should put the DAF widget above or near your Donate Now button for philanthropic-minded people who've already set aside money for donor-advised funds. And what happens when they click on that is they get a drop-down list. They can click to go directly to their DAF and then transfer the money, or I should say recommend a grant, so that you get that. Our customers find that the average is about $5,000, which is a lot more than you would get from the Donate Now button. So make that option available, support your supporters so that they can click on that and give in that way, all right? All right, I'm gonna speed it along because I'm getting a little over the hour almost. I wanna make sure you guys get everything here. So if you support your donors, they'll support your mission. And part of supporting them is by monitoring their digital body language. This is another thing that we do, but you can buy other technology to do this, whereby you put a little code on your website, and that way every single donor by name, by donor ID and such, you can monitor where they're clicking on your website, okay? Because that way you can determine who's hot, who's recently engaged by where they're clicking. For instance, if they click that button to give from their donor advised fund, you should get an instant email or a report as soon as possible so that you know that that donor by name, by donor ID is clicking on that. That means they're hot. They're thinking about philanthropic giving. They're on the VIP microsite and such. So you've got to monitor their digital body language so that you know when they're ready. And then if they didn't make the gift, that's okay. But then they should get like an email that maybe offers them some reasons why they might want to give, things like that. But then the timing is right, and you're really sending the right messages to the right people at the right time. So again, there are other technologies out there. And if anyone's interested, of course, we'll show you how our system does all that. And it actually does it all automatically through AI. All right, so of course, if they click on the give from their DAF, button, that's going to be a better click than if they just want to meet other people like them. All right, that's for prioritization's sake. All right, last point is that you've got to give to your givers. The law of reciprocity is one of the most powerful influencers ever. And here's just one idea for those of you working at colleges or universities. Why not digitize your yearbook and then offer that? Like, talk about you're trying to re-engage donors that are, are lost, or supporters, alum that have never been engaged on your donor base. Don't solicit them as your first entree. Instead, ask them if you can give them something like an old yearbook, printed or reprinted, or digital. Maybe if it's digital, they'll even share pictures with their friends on Facebook groups. So give to your givers. Give them maybe an opportunity to tell their story, make a testimonial out of it, share that on Facebook and show other people. That's a gift also. So they can, people who didn't tell their story can see someone else's story. Give them a workbook, you know? There's all kinds of ways you can give. So my 3 best practices are to focus on that 80-20, and move your budget to focus on that, and then support these higher donor, philanthropic minded supporters, and give to them first. Don't just solicit. Build trust, give to them. Here's a bonus also, is focus a little more on bequest giving. This doesn't mean throw up a planned giving website on your page. That really doesn't do anything. Okay, so I mean, maybe it'll help an advisor or someone, you know, but you need a comprehensive approach in order to really generate massive amounts of planned gifts. I mean, we have organizations that started with us generating as low as a couple $1 million a year, and now $45, $50 million a year from planned gifts. But it takes time, and you got to really focus on it. Just remember that all that money you're spending on acquiring low dollars or monthly donors at $20 a piece or something, $20 a month, you know, one legacy gift, average, say $57,000. It would take you 228 years for the regular donor to equal the one legacy gift from, in this case, Sharon. So, all right, that wraps up our presentation. We're going to go into a question and answer period. You'll see the links about the fundraising report card and other things. I'll send out these slides. Everybody will get everything. And with that, I guess I will let Jeff tell me if anybody wants to ask me a question. Go ahead, pummel me.
Yeah, there's actually a question that just came in here a moment ago that I think is a good one to address. Sarah asked, appreciate the microsite idea. How do you direct high dollar donors to the microsite versus regular giving pages? Is the link only shared to high dollar donors? If we build it, how do we get them to come?
That's a great question. Great question. So the first, the answer to it is that first you have to figure out who's interested in this kind of giving. And that's done usually through a donor survey. You collect the information about people who are interested in more major gifts, and then you automate. It's easier if you automate the cultivation from the surveys so that the people who said that they're interested in that kind of gift get an automated email whereby value is provided on those VIP pages. Remember, you don't want massive number. You don't need massive numbers of people. You want the right people coming to those pages to find information and gain value and be supported in their process of consideration. So the first step is to find people who are interested, then generally it's best to automate the email process so that the right people are getting the right messages, and those offers online, like videos or reports or whatever it is on the VIP microsite, those offers are on the VIP microsite. That's how you get them there. I hope that makes sense. And you can offer a survey. You can make the survey ubiquitous. Make it after people donate. Make it after they attended an event. Make it part of your social media once a month, every week, whatever. Promote the survey. Take the survey. Make it a pop-up on your website, okay? Hope that answered. We could talk about that more if you want to contact us later. I'll explain. Okay.
So I've got another good one that's linked to it, and I know one that Greg, you and I come into face on our end, but certainly because fundraisers face this too. Gregory asked, what happens when your organization won't allow for a microsite, or they want to control all of the messaging, which is through a separate department? How do you put in place all these things that you need if there's blockers at times, which is present in a lot of organizations actually?
Yeah, this is an unfortunate part. So Let me give you an analogy about this, and this may be beyond the scope of the person asking the question. So if anyone's ever seen like a skull crew on a boat, and you got these guys or gals who are all rowing synchronously and all in the same direction, and their timing is perfect. And the ones that row the best, not necessarily the strongest, but the ones who do it the best together as a team are the ones that win. So what this means is that, fortunately or unfortunately, but the organizations that have strong leadership and that understand that silos are not good, but teamwork is good, are the ones that win major gifts. So too often what we've found is that the people controlling the brand and the website are younger, under 65, and they don't understand the philanthropic mind of a 74-year-old who wants to give away $1 million. But they do understand the transactional, impulse-oriented, low-dollar contributor. So they're wrapped up in their world, which is focused on that, and they need to be more wrapped up in the world that will actually ensure that they have jobs next year. So I guess what I would say is, how do you do that? You start by sending this video to your leadership if they'll take it. Maybe leave it anonymously somehow for them, because they've got to understand that it's their job as a leader to build a functional team that recognizes the problem and that they need to work together. But unfortunately, I'm sorry, but the brand police and the website coder have got to get out of the way and play as a team. They won't know what words to use and how to write it and what pictures to use either. They'll just want to go for the donation all the time. And you can't do that with a philanthropic giving process. Hope that was the answer you were looking for. It might not be. All right, what else?
Yeah, no, and just like I think also telling stories to your donors about other donors, keep telling stories internally about all the people that step up and make it publicly known, make them hear the fact that it is generating the revenue it is at the cost it is, and how much more you could get, from even putting even a little more fuel in that tank in terms of the resources.
Hold on, that's a great idea. I just want to mention, because the answer I gave is probably not all that practical. So whoever asked that question, here's a better answer. I'm sorry, the first one was not so good. Because I'm reminded of a fundraiser at a nature organization that did this, is that rather than trying to break stuff or getting political and getting people angry, she just every day and every week, she would just write a donor story and like put it on the refrigerator in the break room, and put another thing, or thank the digital team for this or that, but just kept like reminding them that like this $50,000 gift came in because of X, Y, and Z. And after a while, people were like, hold on, I won't say her name, but they were like, hold on, I didn't realize what's going on over there. How can we work together? This is, and so that's maybe a better way to take leadership on your own than demanding that your leadership do their job. Better answer. Thank you, Jeff.
I also think that, although this one's easier said than done, that there needs to be, we talk about a transition about sort of how you are grading those that are in control of, that annual fund. It shouldn't just be based off, their acquisition retention. It should be based off how many of those leads did you refer to major unplanned gifts. It should be based off the lifetime value of the donors they're bringing in. And so that's also another factor in terms of just internally making a culture of philanthropy that supports the fact that your biggest win is not a $5 gift. It is getting that donor to actually come into communication with you about a bit more meaningful gift.
Well, annual fund and low dollar acquisition is a feeder for mid-level, major, and legacy giving, right? But too often it's looked at as a revenue generator. So it's really a lead generator. If you look at it as a revenue generator, the low dollar gift team, then they are responsible for maintaining low dollar transactions. But if they're instead rewarded for finding the best major donors among the low dollar donors and giving them up to the major gifts and legacy gifts team, that's a good way to go. Yeah.
Here's a question that may apply to some or many of the folks out there, but when thinking about an investment in technology like you're just kind of describing today, how can an organization know if they're really sort of the right size in a way, or have the right sort of maturity or things of that nature to really be investing in technology, or should they be doing it in-house? How would you speak to just smaller and mid-sized organizations approaching kind of the types of solutions you're describing?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've seen smaller organizations invest in technologies that don't actually raise money. They'll invest in accounting software, or they'll invest in an event that maybe lost money last year, but they won't invest in technology to actually affect major philanthropic giving, legacy giving. So I think it's just a matter of really looking at your cost of acquisition and your cost of each marketing channel, and the ROI that you get from certain types of investments. So if you took all the investments, all the technologies that you line up and line them as far as what's the ROI that I get, or what's the cost, and then you place the kind of technologies I'm talking about on there, recognizing that you should get at least 10-to-1 return on investment from the type of tech I'm talking about. And over time, it should be 100-to-1. If you're not getting 10-to-1 ROI from a technology, at least, then you've got to rethink it. Take a pragmatic view. Yeah.
So I think, at least for right now, we have probably run through all the questions that have come in at this point. Perhaps, is there just any closing note you'd like to end on here, Greg?
No, there's a survey after this, of course. So please take our survey after the event so we know how we're doing, especially me, so I know how I could change for you and make better presentations. Of course, this is free, so I guess maybe you got what you paid for. Hopefully you got more than you had expected. But yeah, thank you all for visiting and attending, and I hope you'll sign up for my blog, my newsletter, connect with me on LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. And I wish you good luck in these turbulent times of fundraising climate change.